It's 6:33. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Ellie and Martin.
Let's take a look at today's front pages for you now. And the Mail leads with energy bills to fall £450 as cap is slashed.
I hear people throwing their tea in the air at home. Hurrah! The Express says it's a hat trick as Boris and Carrie's pregnancy joy. Maybe not such good news for breakfast. Anyway.
Yeah, 3 babies in 3 years.
Yeah.
They've been busy. And the Mirror's exclusive splash has the solicitor of Fred West's wife saying, "Give up your sick secrets, Rose." Something a bit different.
Yeah, it is. There's yin and yang in that intro there. So anyway, let's go through some of those stories and inside the papers. Join us to go through them. Our journalist and author Ella Whelan and the legendary broadcaster Pete Price. Top of the morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's
Quieter than the Eurovision last week.
Have your ears stopped ringing, Pete?
I just loved all these obscure acts in Liverpool and hadn't a clue who they were, but everybody else did know because they were all fans.
Yeah.
The world was full of
But you were on the
Eurovision
money
fans.
with the public vote. You said cha-cha-cha, Finland. And then they won the public vote.
Yeah. Absolutely,
Man
but
of the
it was
people.
outrageous. It was outrageous. I loved your coverage over last week. It was great being on the show.
Oh, it was fabulous. It was great to have you in Liverpool as well, Pete. It was so, so good. In your home city. Let's have a look at the papers, shall we? And this is The Guardian, the front page. Patients are paying £550 an hour to see a private GP.
Yep, £275 for 30 minutes and £412 for 45 minutes. Love these prices. It's really interesting because the NHS, the inability to offer the services. I think what's happening now is, and by the way, a couple of my friends have actually been to see doctors up north, and it's 150 quid they've paid. So that's a bit of a difference. And I noticed that dental charges here are more expensive than up north. So it might be worth investigating that. The big thing about this is the NHS, we, in my humble opinion, have always taken for granted. And we're in crisis with it because we're losing doctors, we're losing nurses. We've been in a pandemic, and some people are now fed up of waiting. A friend of mine's got to have an operation on his tonsils. He's gone private because it's 3 years waiting list for 3 years, and he's not well with it at all. So, all right, people haven't got money, but some people are saying, I haven't got money, but I'm going to start going privately because I need to get it sorted, and it's my life. So I'll give up things to pay that. I've got private medicine because I'm self-employed, and if I don't work, I don't earn, as we proved through the pandemic because I didn't get furlough. So I need that issue. So it's what value you put on yourself. Now, a lot of people will be saying, but we've got no money. Well, maybe give up cigarettes. Oh, am I opening a can of worms there? And put it into private medicine. But this is very expensive. But
I'd like to bring you in here, Ella, because it's all very well the Guardian making politics out of this, you know, but the fact of the matter is we had a national COVID service for 2 years during lockdowns. We had a massive backlog of people unable. I've got friends who've had to go for private cancer diagnosis because they've been waiting literally 6, 7, 8 months, and it's come back positive. They've got cancer because it wasn't diagnosed early enough because they couldn't get an NHS appointment. So isn't this really a symptom of just locking down the entire health system for 2 years?
I think that's a huge part of it. We know that the desire to kind of shut down massive parts of, in particular hospitals, cancer treatment being shut down. While I was going through fertility treatment, it was shut down for 2 years throughout COVID, which was horrendous for lots of older women who were unable to get treatment after the 2 years. And the backlog is crazy. But there's also, particularly in relation to GPs, there is a problem at the moment with GPs being sort of resistant to have any kind of flexibility around working hours, any kind of, the idea that they provide a public service and maybe should work on, I don't know, weekends or past 5 o'clock is like blasphemy around GPs. So there's I think, public sympathy for this in particular relation to GPs is running out because you just cannot. It's like winning the lottery trying to get a GP appointment. The irritating thing about, the tragic thing about private people going privately is that is then used as an example of choice. So then people who look at the NHS say, well, look, people are already voting with their feet, they're going private, so maybe we should think about changing the system. And that's not fair because you're being forced to go private in many instances. It's not decision.
That's really interesting what you say there. Can I bring in a point when you mentioned the cancer? One thing I learned that when the ambulance people went on strike, there was a lot of operations cancelled that were, if a problem happened when the operation was being performed and they needed maybe to move to a heart hospital, the ambulances weren't there. So because of that, a lot of knock-on effect happened with that as well. So we lost, I'm not saying the ambulance should have gone on strike or not gone on strike, but it was a knock-on effect, which has caused also major problems. But it's down to it. Patients paying £550 an hour to see private GP, it's what you put on yourself, the value. If we didn't have the NHS, what would you do?
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to one of your stories now, at the front page of the Telegraph. An irony here. Jeremy Hunt is saying we're talking the country into an economic decline. It's almost like the Chancellor could do something about that, couldn't he?
Yeah, I mean, you do think the gall of it, but the interesting thing is that this largely has come from an event that took place last week, the National Conservatism Conference, which seems to have really, I mean, it's done what I suppose it sought to do, which was to stir things up within the Conservative Party, and has really irritated a lot of people, Jeremy Hunt included, because of the discussions that took place at that conference about the economy, with lots of criticism for some of their fellow colleagues in the Conservative Party. And Hunt is talking about the kind of use of declinism, saying that actually if we keep being negative about the British economy, we're going to, talk it into existence. He's right and he's wrong. On the one hand, he makes the point about that lots of people blame Brexit for everything, and that there is a real kind of a desire to sort of see the negatives in Brexit and always be, declinist about it. And that's true. There are a lot of politicians in Parliament who would be delighted to be able to say the economy is failing because of Brexit. And so there is
a lot of them would probably blame a comet striking the Earth.
Yeah,
for Brexit.
so he's right in that there is a bit of a Romaniac desire to say, see, we told you life is so awful. It's also true that we know that in relation to the markets, as we saw around the kind of whole Liz Truss economic plan fiasco, if you say things are terrible, then the markets react. So, okay, he's true. He's telling the truth in one sense. On the other hand, I mean, to suggest that everything is absolutely fine and just the fact that you're being a little bit negative is making things worse is a total nonsense. He knows that the British economy, he should know that the British economy has been in dire straits for a very long time.
Yeah.
That actually, as Chancellor, he has the tools to make decisions to maybe make it a little bit better, rather than sort of wagging his finger at everyone discussing it.
Don't you think, Pete, it's like thin gruel from the Chancellor to be told, look, everything's great, just stop being so negative?
Yeah, I understand, but we all know, because of what we do for a living, that negative news sells anyway. But when you mention about the Brexit, I use all the people I know. A pal of mine who's got a very successful business is banging his head against the wall trying to sell it because of paperwork, and just wants to sell product. And because of Brexit, he has the most ridiculous paperwork, and they're dragging their heels because they're saying, you left us, you suffer.
Yeah.
Pete, let's stay with you, shall we? And this is a story that caught my eye this morning on the front page of the Times. Artificial intelligence, the stories about it every single day, isn't there? But this is saying that it's the greatest threat to education, according to head teachers.
Well, yes, apparently the students can cheat and have their essays written for them. But I'm really glad you let me do this story. And I wanted to do this story because it says artificial intelligence is the greatest threat to education. The government are not responding quick enough, and head teachers are really worried about it. I would love to know, I'd love GBNEWS to do a survey with the public and say, what's this about? Because it is so complicated, I don't understand it.
Well, I've got friends that are doing, this is my understanding of it, Pete, but I've got friends who are doing a master's degree at the moment, and they had a takeaway exam last week, so a 24-hour takeaway exam, and a great number of them are using ChatGPT, which is basically you just ask it to write your essay for you. So this is the question, write it for me, and they just send you an essay back, and apparently it just reads like someone's just written it for you. word for word perfect. And there's no way of the teachers or the professors knowing where that's from because technology hasn't caught up where it flags as plagiarism.
Now,
So that is dangerous, isn't
right,
it?
you just told us a story. Doesn't say that in here.
There's another thread as well, which I think is a little bit behind their grumbling.
Yeah.
And we've seen that teachers could be replaced by AI. There'll be teacher bots, ostensibly on screens, getting rid of the need for human teachers. I mean, I think that's a terrible thing, but nevertheless, that could be a direction of travel. So maybe the teachers are complaining because they can see themselves being outmoded by technology.
Well, you can imagine that, but then at the same time, there is a solution to all of this, which is that we just assert the importance of human beings doing things, which is, okay, I remember being, at school or university, and the temptation to cheat was obviously there, and I think most young people are going to do that. But if
Did you ever cheat?
If you, we had to send it in 5 papers, and there was no, unless you kind of, there was none of this electronic submission where you could fudge the word count or anything. It was all there that we had to do it.
That's a yes, I think. Yeah.
It's bluffing because I used to send my essays to my mother, so if that's kind of cheating then. But what I was going to say is that, you understand, particularly if you're a master's student at university, that you're cheating yourself if you cheat, because the whole point is you're there to learn. And if we, particularly in the realm of education, we need to get young people to understand that they're not just there to tick a box. And actually, this is a huge problem with education at the moment, that it does feel like they're just there to tick a box, say that they've done this assessment, say that they've done this exam, but actually say the reason you're here in this classroom is for you to learn things and to enjoy learning things, and no robot could ever replace that.
There's a bigger problem with this, a bigger problem. That means that so many students that you bung a few bob to write your essay are losing out.
They're out of
There's
business.
a false economy being set up here.
But you know what? There's a quick fix in the sense. I think Ellie, you touched on this last week, I think, or perhaps the week before, where you just have to sit exams in exam halls, and you just go old school, and you don't do things electronically, or until teachers. Or until technology can catch up where you can actually flag something that's been created on a chatbot and not by a student, you just simply can't.
Which is what my
submit things
generation.
electronically,
My generation, where I sat in a room and you had nothing, just your pencil and your pen. That was it.
Okay, talking about wielding a pencil, the Chancellor. There's some good news coming here, Ella, onto your story on the front page of the Eye, and that is inflation set to fall. So could we be looking at a long overdue tax cut?
Well, I think this should all be taken with a massive pinch of salt, which is that any kind of announcement in relation to inflation or interest rates or indeed tax cuts has always, at the moment it's a bit like reading tea leaves. It's just, you cannot actually make any sense of whether it's going to be true. I mean, a few weeks ago we were being told, brace yourselves, inflation's going to rise and rise and rise. So, okay, you said people will be chucking their tea in there in celebration, possibly, because the news is out that it's going to drop from 10.1% to anywhere between 8 to 8.5%, which will mean in real terms that possibly your energy bills are going to drop from 2,500 to more like 2,000, which is still 170 thereabouts quid a month. So it's not like book a holiday kind of realm. But that's important to note, that actually, the Chancellor and other people are going to be saying this is wonderful, this shows we're doing something right. Hang on a minute, it's not quite rosy sunny uplands yet. And I think the focus on tax cuts tells you something. So Duncan Smith is quoted in the Eye here saying, this is a wonderful thing because this means that what the Chancellor now has to do is cut taxes. And the reason why he wants them to do that is, he says, only by doing that will we be able to make the case for a Conservative government at the next election. And so you kind of think, oh dear, this is all it's all just about winning elections rather than actually looking at what is necessary for the health of the British economy, which is not to tinker around with taxes. It's not to kind of play look into the crystal ball around inflation and interest rates. It's about actually making the British economy healthy again.
I don't know if you can see that there. You see that there? There's a lovely graph there, look, can you see that? There's a lovely graph of predicted inflation plummeting, look, plummeting. So by the end of 2024, it's going to be down where it was, and that can only mean interest rates going back down. Look at that. We want to go off that cliff. We want our lives back. We want our money back. We want to be able to go on holiday. And how much of this is actually the government, how much of it was going to happen anyway? Nevertheless, something positive to look forward to at long last.
Yes.
And that's what we need.
Hello, Pete. We've got to leave it there, I'm afraid. But these last 2 stories on our list Yes, make sure we do that in the 7 because I like the look of both of those.
Boris,
we'll be doing
too
that.
right.
Yeah, we need to be talking about the new Boris Johnson baby.